Okay, so we're diving into India's Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code,
The IBC, right?
the IBC.
Yeah,
It promised to be this like fast-track system for resolving insolvencies.
right.
330 days sounds pretty good when you say it like
It
that.
does.
But then you look at the numbers and you see the average resolution time is actually 652 days.
More than double.
Yeah, more than double. That's just
Yeah.
the average, right? Some of these cases are going on for years.
It's a head scratcher for sure.
It really is.
Like, what's going on here?
And that's what we're trying to figure out today.
Absolutely.
We're looking at this research report, and it's really cool because it goes beyond just talking about the IBC in theory.
Yeah.
They actually dug into some real case studies
Yeah, real world stuff.
to see what's actually going wrong.
They anonymized everything, of course, for confidentiality.
Right, of course.
But still, it's fascinating stuff.
It is. Like juicy, but like legal juicy.
Exactly. The kind of juicy we like.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty, can you give us a little background on the IBC?
Sure. So the IBC was a huge shift for India.
Like a total system overhaul.
Exactly. Before this, it was all about just liquidating companies.
Like buffer, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But the IBC was designed to change that.
To actually give companies a fighting chance.
Exactly. The focus shifted to reviving, resolving, reorganizing.
Yeah.
Not just hitting that game over button with liquidation.
So maximizing value for everyone involved.
That was the goal for creditors, debtors, even the employees, to make everyone come out. Well, maybe not happy.
Because nobody's happy in bankruptcy.
Right, but at least in a better position than before.
Okay, so with that in mind, let's dive into some of these case studies. And the case studies really show just how bad it can get.
Yeah, it's not pretty.
Like those 652-day average delays we talked about.
Right.
Those are just averages.
Yeah, some of these cases are way beyond that.
Way beyond. Like this first one, a real estate company.
Oh, yeah, that one was a doozy.
They clocked in at 1,608 days past the 270-day target.
It's more than 4 years.
More than 4 years. Like, how is that even possible?
Real estate's tricky, always has been.
What is it about real estate that causes these holdups?
It's the assets themselves, they're not so straightforward.
How so?
Well, think about it. You've got property valuations, market fluctuations.
Right, because the market can change like that.
Exactly. So everyone's trying to figure out what a fair deal even looks like.
And while they're figuring it out, the clock's ticking.
Ticking away, and those delays, they impact everything.
And then there's the committee of creditors.
The COSI.
Right, the COSI, they're like the big decision makers in all of this.
They basically control what happens to the company.
So if they can't agree, everything grinds to a halt.
Pretty much. Yeah.
And this report highlights that, right? Like how critical their role is.
Absolutely. They highlighted one case, a power sector company. They actually had a decent resolution plan on the table.
Okay.
But the COSI just couldn't agree on the terms.
What happened?
They kept going back and forth, revisions, more revisions, and finally they just rejected the plan outright.
Oh, no.
Yeah, by the time they finally brought in someone new to start over, the company was in even worse shape than before.
So those delays actually made things worse.
Yeah, they often do, because the longer it drags on, the more likely you are to get bogged down in litigation.
Speaking of litigation, this next case study, a healthcare company.
Oh, yeah, that one's interesting.
They sailed through the initial resolution process, 178 days. Not bad.
Not bad at all.
But then lawsuits.
Ah, yes, the legal battles.
And not just like a quick court date. We're talking years.
Years of legal battles, can you believe it? It really highlights that even when things seem to be moving smoothly.
Right. You think you're in the clear.
Exactly. But then, bam! External factors, especially litigation, can really throw a wrench in the works.
It's like running a marathon and then finding out you have to run another one right after.
That's a good way to put it. Frustrating, to say the least.
Frustrating is an understatement, I'd say. Okay, so we've got disagreements, we've got lawsuits. It's like, it's a wonder anything gets resolved at all.
It can be a long and winding road.
That's for sure. And this next case, it takes the cake, an automobile company stuck since 2017.
That one's been dragging on for a while.
2,297 days. That's not a delay, that's an eternity. And get this, they've already gone through liquidation.
On paper, at least.
Right. But the assets are still tied up in
So
litigation.
nobody's gutting anything.
It's like winning the lottery and then losing the ticket.
That's a painful analogy, but I get your point.
The report mentioned something called not readily realizable assets. What are those, like unicorn tiers?
Essentially, they're assets that are difficult to sell or even put a price tag on.
So like, give me an example.
Think about intangible assets like patents or disputed properties or things tied up in regulatory hurdles.
Okay, so complicated stuff.
Very complicated, and that complexity breeds delays.
Right, because the longer it takes to figure out what you have and what it's worth.
The longer it takes to actually distribute it to the creditors.
Speaking of which, there was one case in the report, a manufacturing company.
Oh, right. That one actually had a somewhat happy ending.
Well, sort of.
They actually managed to distribute a good chunk of change, about Rs 369 crore, to stakeholders within the stipulated time.
See, that's what I like to hear.
But there's always a but. They're still stuck trying to liquidate everything else because of a legal battle over some land.
Ugh, so close, yet so far.
It's like they ran the marathon, but then someone handed them a map to another one.
So frustrating. But okay, we've talked about the problem, these delays, but what about solutions? What can we actually do about it?
Well, the report makes it clear. The IBC, it's a good start, but it needs some work.
Like a tune-up.
Exactly. We need to make it more efficient, more effective.
So where do we start?
Well, one major issue is a lack of cooperation from the previous management of these companies.
You'd think they'd want to help, right?
You'd think so, but often they're more interested in protecting themselves.
So it's like every man for himself.
In a way, yes, and that can create huge roadblocks.
What about the committee of creditors? We've talked about their power, but it seems like that power can also lead to delays.
Absolutely. When you have so many stakeholders with different interests, it can be tough to reach a consensus.
Right, like herding cats.
Exactly. And while they're trying to herd those cats, the clock is ticking and the asset value is eroding.
So we need to speed up the process, but how?
Well, the report suggests a few things, like empowering representatives within the COC to make decisions more quickly.
So less bureaucracy.
Exactly, and streamlining the voting process, maybe even using technology to make it more efficient.
Because time is money, right?
Especially in insolvency cases,
Yeah.
and speaking of time, the National Company Law Tribunal, the NCLT, they're completely swamped with cases.
Overworked and understaffed. The story of our lives.
Right. So the report suggests using technology to streamline things there as well, maybe even bringing in mediators to help resolve disputes more quickly.
So it's not just about changing the rules, it's about changing the way we approach the whole system.
Exactly. And ultimately, it all comes down to recognizing that time is of the essence, as the report so aptly puts it.
Because delays equal losses.
And the success of the IBC, the success of India's insolvency framework, depends on our ability to minimize those losses.
It's a team effort, and it requires a shift in mindset.
From all stakeholders.
Absolutely. From the companies themselves to the creditors to the legal system, we all have a role to play in making this work.
Because a more efficient insolvency system, it benefits everyone.
It's about creating a system that supports growth, not one that stifles it.
And that's something we can all get behind.
Well said, well said. So for you listening, we've taken a deep dive into the world of India's Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, the IBC.
We've seen its promise, its challenges, and hopefully glimpsed some potential solutions.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but understanding the intricacies, the delays, the human element.
That's the first step towards creating a more effective system.
Exactly, because it's not just about the rules on paper, it's about how those rules play out in the real world.
And how we, as stakeholders, choose to navigate that world.
Well said. And on that note, until next time, keep asking those tough questions and keep diving deep.
We'll see you next time.